All right, Michael Van Runkle here with HotCars.com. I'm back in the same spot with what looks like the exact same Polaris Slingshot, but in reality, everything has changed because this is the manual equipped Slingshot. Now I understand why Polaris had to make an automatic Slingshot. They had to do it just to move units. And when they did it, they had to keep the weight super light. In my mind, there are really two types of customers for the Slingshot. There are those who are in it for the style and the radical looks, and there are those who want the performance potential of such a lightweight, powerful, hardcore three-wheeler. To be fair, the Slingshot does turn heads everywhere I go. I've taken it to Trader Joe's, I've driven it all over West LA, I've taken it to Malibu Cars and Coffee. No, it's not going to attract everyone like a Ford GT or Ferraris, but people did come up to me wanting to learn more about the Slingshot, sort of confused as to what it was about, what it is, do you need to wear a helmet, that kind of thing. I want to talk to the enthusiasts who are interested in that performance for the Slingshot, because talking to my two contacts at Polaris, Garrett Moore and James Holroyd, I truly believe that the stick shift version is how the Slingshot is supposed to be enjoyed. Today, I want to go over how I would spec and mod the Slingshot from Polaris, and even though Polaris can't endorse it, what looks like a pretty strong aftermarket community. In the meantime, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. It makes a huge difference for us. Thanks. Of course, Polaris loaned me the best and baddest Slingshot in R trim, but if I was to start, I would go with the Slingshot S, even though it's down on power. The R has 203 horsepower and 144 pound-feet of torque, whereas the S has 178 horsepower and 120 pound-feet of torque. I honestly don't think that that small difference makes all the difference in the world, given that there's only one single rear wheel and you can burn rubber at will in this thing, no problem, with the traction control fully turned on. So do you really need 25 additional horsepower? I don't think so. Plus, the base S, which you can get with the stick shift only, starts under 20 grand. Unfortunately, it only comes in white. I would have preferred black to help this thing have a little bit more of that sort of Batman vibe. But I don't want to spend an extra $2,500 to step up to the SL to have more color options. So I'll just live with white. In terms of options that I would buy from Polaris, the one thing I'd really splurge on is the heated and cooled seats. They cost a little bit much. They usually run for about $2,400. And right now Polaris is actually having a promo where the pair of seats cost $1,900 plus install. So that's not bad. And I think it would make a really big difference in terms of comfort, which would then inspire you to drive the Slingshot more than you might otherwise if it's really hot out or it's really cold out and you have no climate control and no protection from the weather. The only other option I think I would jump on is a set of Sparco enhanced pedals that have a wider pad for your foot on the clutch and the brake. With such an aggressive vehicle, you're driving really hard, I think having those wider pedals would make it a lot easier to sort of heel and toe when you're in the corners and you're pushing it hard. In terms of the things that this Slingshot R has that I definitely don't need, I'll start with the sound system. It's these huge speakers. It's by Rockford Fosgate, super upgraded, and it's really, really loud. But I have to wear a helmet here in California, so that's entirely pointless. It costs a lot, and by cutting that out, Polaris says you can save up to 30 pounds, which, you know, in a normal car, 30 pounds is whatever, but the Slingshot only weighs 1,600 pounds, so 30 pounds makes a little bit of a difference. And then you've got the navigation and computer systems. You know, I don't need navigation in this thing. I don't need Apple CarPlay. I don't need cruise control even though I really do love cruise control, because my first car, an E46 BMW, somehow did not have cruise control, and I drove that thing all the way to Maine and back with my foot, and sometimes, you know, my left foot when my right foot got tired. There is something to be said for how much the Slingshot makes you feel a little bit like you're a race car driver. You're in this tiny thing, you got the helmet on, you got all this wind because the windshield's so small, you're blasting along, small steering wheel. So I asked Garrett Moore and James Holroyd if there was anything like a track-only, total stripper, you know, without any of the gadgets at all, super lightweight, and they told me that there is a dealership in Canada that set up a little bit of a racing league, and they'll strip your Slingshot. Well, you might be able to do that yourself with some of these mods. It's one idea, but if you want to keep it road legal, that's another idea. I think it would be cool to get one of these on the track in a real controlled environment and see what it's capable of, and of course, whether I'm capable of that also. Cutting out the electric doodads saves some weight, and weight savings are what the Slingshot is all about after all. This thing, it's got a screaming engine. It revs to 8,500, though I swear it'll go to 9,000. That's good for 40 miles an hour in first gear, 70 plus in second, and 110 in third. Don't ask me how I know that, but I will tell you, it's pretty unpleasant with such a low windshield and a helmet and the wind battering you about. This does not have the same aerodynamics as like a McLaren Elva, where they've designed it so the wind sweeps over your head and you stay glamorous. This thing is hardcore, and taking it that fast, honestly, not the most fun in the world. Where it's at home is in the tight canyons when you're between first and second, going like, 30 to 60. That's when you're really gonna be enjoying yourself. But while you're up there tearing it up, let's talk about some of the aftermarket modifications that might help the Slingshot be even more fun, because let's be honest, it's not a perfect design from the factory. Now, some people might be saying, wait a second, if you really want to go tear it up, then you need those extra 25 horsepower that come with the R trim. But luckily, Slingshot is cool enough that they'll go right ahead and just sell you the ECU tune. That's the only difference in the engines. So you can get that extra power for 600 bucks plus install for the flash, which shouldn't take too long. And hopefully the dealers won't upcharge you too much on that. Once I hopped into the manual equipped Slingshot and really started to get engaged with this vehicle, the first thing I started to notice after getting past the sputteriness of the automatic was that the brakes could really use a little bit more bite. Luckily, the aftermarket community has a number of different solutions for this. You can get upgraded brakes for the front and the single rear wheel with Willwood units. You can get up to 14-inch rotors. You can get 6-piston calipers, the whole shebang. Well, the price is a little steep. It starts at like 1,600 bucks for just the fronts, or to get all 3 corners done, because this thing only has 3 wheels, will probably run you closer to 3,500 bucks. That's a lot, and one cheap way to really start out might be just to upgrade the brake pads themselves and see if that makes a significant enough difference to warrant, saving 1,400 bucks, because the brake pads themselves will probably cost under 200 at most. Another mod that I think a lot of people will probably find is pretty warranted is a short shift upgrade. Well, the shifter's actually pretty good. It's got a direct linkage to the transmission, so there's no linkage to really modify to make it a shorter shifter other than just dropping it down a little bit. I think it would be worth it, especially if you're driving in Slingshot mode, which I do all the time because you have better throttle response and tighter steering. With a short shifter, the shift knob might match the steering weight a little bit better. It's a pretty nice shifter. I think the short shifter would make a big difference because this engine is just so rev happy. Part of that is because for the new generation with the new ProDrive transmission, Slingshot installed a much lighter flywheel that weighs a little over half as much as the previous generation. It's only 11.2 pounds, so this thing just screams up when you're heel towing, and having just slightly shorter throws, I think would make shifting a lot better when downshifting in the hills. And for 105 bucks, it would pretty much be hard to go wrong since it only takes like 20 minutes to install at home. Of course, the single best place to spend money when modifying any vehicle is in the tires, whether you're off-roading or whether you've got a sports car. These are Kendas. They're 305 wide because we got the R trim here. But the S would come with 265 wide wheels and probably even worse tires. I would personally probably save that money because it costs 2,500 bucks to just do this single rear wheel and tire from Polaris. I'd get an aftermarket wheel with plenty of room for my big brake kit, and I'd go with Michelin Pilot Sports, which are, a couple $100 bucks. All in, that would save me 1,500 bucks, and I think would go a long way to putting the power from this belt-driven rear end to the ground more effectively. And then, once you've hopefully got a lot more grip, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about some potential power upgrades. There are turbocharge and supercharge options available in the aftermarket community. They range from like $4,500 to $5,000. I wouldn't go that route. It seems a little silly. With this thing, an R trim and the 305 wide tire, I was definitely able to keep up with a Porsche and a Lotus Elise I was chasing around in Malibu. No problem whatsoever. Even though I did get a little nervous taking corners at high speeds after I saw them and decided to catch up to them. Maybe a set of exhaust headers and an improvement on the teardrop design, because if you'll notice, there's no exhaust pipes visible on this thing. The headers just come out and dump the exhaust underneath, which if you're idling in traffic does lead to a little bit of exhaust fumes in your helmet here in California. That would just be another few $100. I personally think the Slingshot is super loud and doesn't need it, but maybe it would have sort of a deeper grumble than the rumble that it has right now. The truth is, this ProStar engine, which is the first inline-4 Polaris has built in-house, is pretty impressive. No, it's not as powerful as a Honda S2000s, which came out in the early 2000s, but it definitely does the job, especially when you're up there in the high RPMs. It just feels like you could rev for days, and you're almost surprised when you hit the red line. That's a lot of fun. And then you got a shift. And the shifter's pretty nice. With some little upgrades though, I think it could be on the next level, and you'd have spent somewhere around $25,000 or even less for what's really just a hardcore enthusiast automobile. Well, if you can call it that. It's a hardcore enthusiast vehicle anyways. I personally think that having the Slingshot for about a month now, between the automatic, which was meh, and the manual, which I'm pretty into, has made me a much better driver. I've learned how to better control my throttle inputs, a little bit of opposite steering, really get those burnouts down, and feel a little more confident in the hills. I really appreciate that. I just wish Polaris would make one of these things with 4 wheels, but I realize that's not really feasible, because then you're adding weight, then the federal government says you need more safety regulations, and then all of a sudden you've got an aerial Atom that costs 50 grand. But maybe they could do one lighter, and one day we can enjoy that hardcore tube frame, super screaming engine with, of course, a manual transmission. In the meantime, big thanks to Polaris for loaning me these 2 Slingshots, and thank you for watching. Please, before you sign off, like this video and subscribe to our channel. It makes a big difference for us. Thanks.